What if your neighbor harassed you with trash and dog poop because of your skin color? You ignored it a few times, but it didn't stop, so you had to fight back. What happened to make that neighbor realize he was wrong? Find out now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to H2 Black Thread for more shocking stories. Lisa Caldwell had always been proud of her home in Sunnybrook, one of those quiet, upscale neighborhoods tucked neatly just outside Atlanta. With manicured lawns, beautiful brick houses, and friendly waves exchanged every morning, it felt exactly like the kind of place Lisa had always dreamed of. People here were respectful, friendly, and most importantly, everyone seemed to know their place. At least, that's how Lisa saw things. She loved her community, took pride in her involvement with local events, and always kept an eye out for new neighbors. When the for sale sign finally vanished from the Browns' old house next door, Lisa couldn't help but feel curious. It had sat empty for months since the Browns moved down to Florida, and Lisa had grown comfortable with the quiet. Lisa watched carefully from her kitchen window as a large moving truck pulled into the driveway. She leaned forward, holding her coffee mug, her curiosity piqued. Who would it be this time? A retired couple, perhaps. Maybe a young family. It always mattered who moved in. After all, Sunnybrook had a certain reputation. But then, Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly when a shiny black luxury SUV pulled up behind the movers. A tall, confident-looking black man stepped out, dressed casually in dark jeans and a crisp button-down shirt. Lisa blinked, slightly surprised. Somehow, in the quiet recesses of her mind, this wasn't the type of person she'd envisioned moving into Sunnybrook. Instantly, she shook her head, dismissing the uncomfortable feeling that crept into her chest. "No," Lisa murmured to herself. "That's not it." She insisted quietly to no one in particular that she wasn't prejudiced. Never had been. But the lingering discomfort wouldn't fade. Throughout the morning, Lisa found excuses to glance toward her new neighbor. She noted the neatness with which he instructed the movers, how carefully furniture was arranged, and how effortlessly he interacted with everyone around him. But rather than admiration, Lisa felt a vague irritation. The man, whom she soon learned from overhearing another neighbor was named Terrence Brooks, seemed to settle in almost too comfortably, as if he'd lived there all his life. Later that afternoon, Sarah Thompson, the chatty neighbor from across the street, stopped by to welcome Terrence. Lisa observed them conversing warmly and laughing like old friends. She couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but the friendly laughter drifting over felt irritatingly out of place to her. When Lisa's daughter, Emily, came by for lunch later that day, Lisa couldn't resist bringing up the new neighbor almost immediately. "You noticed the new guy next door?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. Emily barely glanced up from her phone. "New guy? No, why?" "Just moved in today," Lisa continued, pouring lemonade into 2 glasses. "I don't know, seems a little out of place here." Emily shot her mother a skeptical glance. "Why? What's wrong with him?" Lisa hesitated, sensing Emily's immediate suspicion. "Nothing, it's just, he doesn't exactly seem like he'd pick Sunnybrook. It's kind of surprising." Emily paused, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. "What exactly are you implying, Mom?" "Nothing," Lisa quickly replied, feeling a bit defensive. "It's just unexpected, is all." "Maybe unexpected in your mind," Emily said sharply, "but not unusual to everyone else." Emily's irritation was clear, and Lisa immediately regretted mentioning it. Emily had always been quick to call her mother out, and Lisa didn't appreciate the implication that she might harbor biases. For the next several days, Lisa couldn't shake off her curiosity about Terrence Brooks. She watched him discreetly from her windows, never openly, always casually, as if it were purely accidental. Terrence seemed remarkably friendly, frequently greeting neighbors, smiling broadly, and warmly waving to passers-by. It irked Lisa even more. It seemed like everyone else in Sunnybrook quickly accepted him, no questions asked. On Tuesday morning, Lisa finally crossed paths with Terrence. She stepped outside to pick up her newspaper just as he was heading out to his car. Terrence turned and immediately offered a friendly smile and a casual wave. "Good morning," he called cheerfully. "I'm Terrence Brooks, just moved in next door." Lisa forced a polite, tight-lipped smile. "Lisa Caldwell, welcome to Sunnybrook." "Thanks, Lisa," Terrence replied warmly. "Beautiful neighborhood. I'm looking forward to getting involved around here." Lisa nodded stiffly. "Yes, it's very nice." Her words sounded hollow even to herself, and she quickly retreated into her home feeling oddly frustrated. She knew he had done nothing wrong. Terrence was polite, friendly, clearly respectable, so why did she feel such resistance toward him? Throughout that week, Lisa found herself unintentionally overhearing snippets of conversations about Terrence from neighbors at the community center and the local coffee shop. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to have him around, impressed by his manners, his career, even his sense of humor. With each glowing remark, Lisa felt more irritated, more isolated in her unease. The following Saturday, Lisa spotted Terrence out front, carefully placing elegant outdoor furniture on his porch and setting up stylish lighting along the walkway. Everything he did felt annoyingly tasteful. Lisa watched him work, silently critiquing every detail. She found herself labeling his decor as too modern, too bold, too out of place, even though objectively, she knew it was all beautifully done. Lisa's inner resentment began to build quietly. She wouldn't admit to anyone, not even herself, that her discomfort was rooted in prejudice. Instead, she rationalized it as concern for the neighborhood's standards, worry that things were changing too rapidly, too drastically. She clung tightly to her sense of control, convinced that her unease was justified. Yet late at night, lying awake in bed, Lisa's thoughts betrayed her. She couldn't quite silence the voice that whispered in her mind, challenging her justifications. The voice that asked uncomfortable questions, questions about her true feelings and fears, about what really bothered her so deeply. She tried pushing those thoughts away, but they persisted stubbornly, leaving her restless and dissatisfied. Terrence, oblivious to Lisa's internal struggle, continued to integrate seamlessly into the neighborhood. With every neighborly greeting, every friendly exchange Lisa observed from a distance, her resentment intensified. She had no idea yet how deeply these unspoken feelings would soon affect her life, her reputation, and the peaceful community she had spent decades carefully building around herself. Unaware of the coming storm, Lisa continued watching from afar, convinced she was protecting something valuable, even as she unknowingly prepared to set a painful chain of events into motion. It wasn't like Lisa Caldwell to act openly confrontational. She had always considered herself refined and dignified, the kind of person who handled disagreements with polite smiles and careful conversations behind closed doors. But for reasons she struggled to fully admit, Terrence Brooks' arrival in Sunnybrook had unsettled something deep within her. It started subtly at first, so subtly Lisa barely acknowledged what she was doing. A candy wrapper tossed carelessly from her pocket, landing neatly onto Terrence's pristine lawn. A receipt fluttering from her purse, conveniently forgotten as she walked past his driveway late at night. These actions seemed small and harmless enough, just insignificant bits of trash that Lisa convinced herself were accidents. But deep down, she knew exactly what she was doing. After a few days, Lisa's behavior became more deliberate. She'd glance around, making sure no one saw her, before casually flicking a gum wrapper onto Terrence's driveway or brushing crumbs off her hand onto his manicured grass. Each morning, she secretly felt a twisted satisfaction when she saw him outside, quietly picking up the litter she had left behind. But these small provocations didn't feel like enough. Lisa still felt uncomfortable, still irritated by Terrence's easy smile and friendly charm. She needed something else, something more visible, something that clearly expressed her displeasure without forcing her into direct confrontation. That's when she thought of her dog, Baxter. Baxter was a small, fluffy Maltese mix, adored by Lisa and, truth be told, just a little spoiled. Lisa regularly walked Baxter around the neighborhood, chatting with neighbors, enjoying the exercise, and yes, keeping tabs on the neighborhood happenings. But lately, her walks had taken a different route. Every evening, Lisa deliberately steered Baxter towards Terrence's property. "Come on, Baxter," she'd coax, gently tugging his leash toward Terrence's neatly edged lawn. Baxter, oblivious to any malicious intent, happily trotted along, sniffing enthusiastically around the bushes lining Terrence's yard. The first time Baxter relieved himself on Terrence's lawn, Lisa paused, looking around nervously. But when she saw no one was watching, she simply walked away, leaving the mess behind. Her heart raced slightly with guilt, but beneath that, there was a strange, almost empowering thrill. She felt as though she'd finally found a way to assert herself without openly confronting Terrence, and so it became routine. Every day, Lisa guided Baxter back to Terrence's lawn, never cleaning up after him, allowing the mess to accumulate. She knew it was petty. She even knew it was childish. But she couldn't deny how satisfying it felt, even if she couldn't fully explain why. Terrence, for his part, had begun noticing these changes immediately. Each morning, he'd find litter scattered around his driveway, and worse, the unpleasant surprises left by Lisa's dog. He knew right away it was deliberate. Sunnybrook was meticulously maintained, and neighbors took pride in cleanliness. There was no way this mess was accidental or unnoticed by anyone else. At first, Terrence chose patience. He quietly picked up the trash each day, disposed of Baxter's mess without complaint, and tried to keep his annoyance under control. Terrence had faced subtle prejudice before, but he'd sincerely hoped Sunnybrook would be different. Still, experience had taught him it was best to gather evidence before confronting anyone directly. He began making small, discreet changes around his property. He installed a high-quality security camera system with motion sensors, carefully concealed within the landscaping and beneath the eaves of his roof. He ensured the cameras covered the entire perimeter, particularly focusing on the areas most affected, near the driveway, along the walkway, and especially the front lawn. Terrence didn't mention the cameras to anyone. He continued greeting neighbors warmly, smiling politely at Lisa whenever their paths crossed, even though he noticed her stiff, forced responses. Lisa remained unaware of Terrence's new security system, continuing her nightly routines as though nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior didn't go unnoticed by others. Sarah Thompson, the neighbor who had warmly welcomed Terrence, began to suspect something was off. One evening, Sarah spotted Lisa lingering oddly near Terrence's driveway, Baxter at her side. Sarah waved casually, but Lisa looked startled and hurried away. Sarah shrugged it off at first, but couldn't help wondering about Lisa's strange reaction. Terrence carefully monitored the footage captured by his cameras. Each morning, reviewing clips on his laptop with a steaming cup of coffee, he saw Lisa clearly captured on video. He watched, both amused and frustrated, as Lisa repeatedly guided Baxter onto his lawn and casually discarded bits of trash. Terrence felt conflicted. Part of him wanted to confront Lisa immediately, to ask her directly what her problem was, but a stronger, wiser part of him decided to wait. He knew the moment had to be right. If he acted hastily, Lisa might easily twist the situation against him. Terrence was determined to handle this delicately and effectively. A few weeks passed, and Lisa grew bolder, believing she was getting away with everything. She felt emboldened, even justified. Terrence hadn't confronted her, hadn't reacted at all. Perhaps, she thought smugly, he wasn't as confident as he seemed. Maybe he felt intimidated by her silent protest. But Lisa's actions were taking a toll on her own conscience as well. Late at night, when the neighborhood was quiet and she lay awake in bed, she couldn't avoid the uncomfortable truths bubbling up within her. She had always prided herself on being open-minded, a good person, an example to her daughter. Yet here she was, secretly throwing trash on a neighbor's lawn and leaving dog messes to spite someone who'd done absolutely nothing wrong. Lisa tried repeatedly to justify herself, claiming it was about standards, about protecting her neighborhood. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that her motivations weren't as noble as she'd hoped. Terrence, meanwhile, patiently collected evidence, preparing for the day when he would finally confront Lisa, not with anger but with undeniable proof. He knew the situation had to be handled carefully. Sunnybrook was tightly knit, and he was still the newcomer, an outsider in many eyes. As the days stretched on, the tension built silently between Lisa and Terrence, a hidden war of quiet provocations and steady patience. Neither openly acknowledged the conflict, but both knew it was brewing beneath the calm surface of their interactions. Lisa continued her nightly rituals, confident yet uneasy, while Terrence patiently waited, gathering proof, knowing the moment to reveal the truth was rapidly approaching. Lisa woke up that morning feeling unusually restless. The sunshine streaming through her bedroom curtains seemed brighter, sharper somehow, as though even nature sensed the tension that had been silently brewing between her and Terrence. She shrugged off the strange feeling, stretched lazily, and began her usual morning routine: coffee, breakfast, and scrolling absent-mindedly through social media. Yet today, she couldn't shake off a lingering discomfort. The rituals she'd established, the passive-aggressive provocations she'd been directing toward Terrence, felt heavier now. She sighed, wondering briefly if she should stop, but quickly pushed that thought aside. Admitting fault wasn't her style, and besides, she told herself, Terrence needed to learn he couldn't just waltz into Sunnybrook and disrupt everything. By mid-morning, Lisa clipped Baxter's leash onto his collar, gently coaxing him toward the sidewalk. As always, Baxter trotted cheerfully alongside her, oblivious to his owner's uneasy mood. Approaching Terrence's home, Lisa glanced casually around, making sure the street appeared deserted. But as Baxter started sniffing around Terrence's neatly maintained lawn, the front door suddenly opened. Lisa froze, her heart jumping as Terrence stepped outside, calm yet determined. His expression wasn't angry exactly, but it was unmistakably serious. "Morning, Lisa," Terrence said evenly, walking slowly down the driveway toward her. Lisa quickly straightened, forcing a casual smile. "Oh, good morning, Terrence. Lovely day, isn't it?" "Yeah, beautiful," Terrence replied, his eyes carefully focused on Lisa. "Mind cleaning up after Baxter today?" Lisa felt her cheeks flush slightly. Her pulse quickened defensively. "Excuse me." Terrence gestured politely toward Baxter, who just finished leaving another unwanted deposit right near Terrence's mailbox. "I'd appreciate it if you could clean up after your dog." Lisa's discomfort quickly shifted to irritation. "It's just a little bit of dog waste, Terrence. This is a neighborhood, after all. Dogs do that." Terrence's voice remained calm, patient even. "I agree, Lisa, but responsible dog owners typically clean it up." Lisa stiffened visibly, bristling at Terrence's gentle reprimand. Her voice sharpened. "Are you trying to lecture me on responsibility? I've lived here for 20 years. Maybe you should focus on yourself and leave others alone." Terrence took a measured breath, clearly holding on to his patience. "Lisa, I'm simply asking you respectfully." I don't think it's an unreasonable request. Lisa shook her head dismissively. You know, Terrence, you're new here. Maybe you should show some respect to the neighbors who have made this community what it is. A flicker of something, disappointment or maybe resignation, passed through Terrence's eyes. He nodded slowly. All right, Lisa, if that's how you feel. Lisa turned away sharply, pulling Baxter along with her. Her heart raced with anger and embarrassment. She hadn't expected Terrence to confront her so directly, and she definitely hadn't planned for it to end like this. She walked home quickly, convinced she'd put Terrence back in his place. Yet deep down, anxiety tugged at her mind, warning her this wasn't over yet. Inside his home, Terrence sighed deeply. He'd hoped Lisa would simply acknowledge her actions, maybe apologize or at least agree to stop. Her stubborn defiance left him feeling disappointed. Terrence knew he had no other choice but to handle this differently now. He opened his laptop, clicked open the security footage he'd meticulously stored, and began carefully reviewing it once more. The videos clearly showed Lisa's repeated, deliberate provocations. Terrence hesitated only a moment longer, knowing the impact this could have, before logging onto the Sunnybrook Community Facebook group. Carefully, he typed out a brief but clear message. Dear Sunnybrook neighbors, I usually prefer handling matters privately, but recent events have left me no choice but to seek community awareness. Please review this footage. He uploaded a series of clips clearly showing Lisa intentionally letting Baxter relieve himself on Terrence's lawn without cleaning up, as well as multiple incidents of her throwing trash onto his property. Terrence paused, took a breath, and clicked post. Within minutes, the community group exploded with activity. Notifications flooded Terrence's screen as neighbors reacted with shock, disbelief, and anger. The evidence was undeniable, and the community's reaction swift. Meanwhile, Lisa was in her kitchen, still irritated, making herself another cup of coffee when her phone buzzed urgently. She picked it up, seeing a message notification from Sarah Thompson, her friend and neighbor across the street. Lisa, have you seen what's going on in the group? Lisa frowned, confused, and quickly opened Facebook. Her heart instantly dropped as she saw the video thumbnails, her image clearly visible in each clip. With trembling fingers, she clicked play, her stomach churning violently as she watched herself repeatedly disrespect Terrence's property. Panic surged through Lisa. The video was quickly racking up comments and shares. Neighbors she had considered friends were reacting with shock and disgust. People she'd known for years expressed disappointment and outrage. Her face flushed hotly, humiliation settling deep within her. Almost immediately, another message came in from Sarah. Lisa, what were you thinking? This is terrible. Lisa scrambled to type a reply, her fingers shaking. Sarah, it's not what it looks like. Terrence is exaggerating everything. But even as she typed those words, Lisa knew how weak her excuse sounded. The footage was crystal clear, leaving no room for doubt or misunderstanding. She'd been caught, undeniably and publicly. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of escalating embarrassment. Lisa couldn't bring herself to leave her home, terrified of facing neighbors she'd known for years. Her phone rang continuously, friends, acquaintances, even Emily calling, all seeking explanations. Finally, Lisa answered Emily's call, her voice shaking. Emily, I'm sorry, I don't know. Mom, stop. Emily's voice was firm, anger tinged with deep disappointment. I've watched the video, how could you? What is wrong with you? Lisa's voice cracked. I didn't think. That's obvious, Emily cut her off sharply. I warned you about this. You need to apologize immediately. You've embarrassed not just yourself, but me too. Emily ended the call abruptly, leaving Lisa sitting in stunned silence, the weight of her actions finally hitting her fully. Terrence's video wasn't just embarrassing, It had completely shattered the careful image she'd built over 2 decades. Outside, neighbors whispered about Lisa Caldwell, the woman who had always acted like Sunnybrook's unofficial protector. Now, she was the source of the very controversy she'd always feared. Alone in her kitchen, Lisa faced a reality she'd never anticipated. Her hidden prejudice had been publicly exposed, and there was no turning back. Lisa Caldwell had always believed she knew exactly where she stood within Sunnybrook's social circles. She had spent nearly 2 decades building her reputation as a reliable, respected neighbor, one who hosted events, welcomed newcomers, and fiercely protected the neighborhood's image. But now, overnight, everything had unraveled. It had only been days since Terrence's video went viral, yet Lisa felt the impact immediately. Everywhere she looked, people she'd known for years seemed to avoid eye contact. Conversations that used to flow easily now died abruptly as soon as she approached. Invitations to coffee mornings, community yoga sessions, and weekend barbecues stopped appearing in her mailbox. Her social media feeds, once full of cheerful neighborhood posts, were now eerily silent toward her. Even a simple grocery run had become an ordeal. When Lisa entered Sunnybrook's local market one morning, her heart sank at the whispered conversations that suddenly fell quiet as she walked past. She recognized faces, neighbors who used to greet her warmly, now barely acknowledging her presence. The cashier, a young woman Lisa had known for years, spoke minimally, avoiding her gaze as she hurriedly bagged her groceries. Returning home that afternoon, Lisa felt a growing sense of despair. Her reputation, something she'd always protected fiercely, was slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp. But nothing hurt more than when she received a visit from Sarah Thompson, one of her closest friends. Sarah knocked gently at Lisa's door, hesitating briefly before Lisa finally opened it. Lisa attempted a weak smile, but Sarah's serious expression immediately told her this wasn't a friendly visit. "Lisa," Sarah began carefully, eyes filled with genuine disappointment. "Can we talk?" Lisa stepped aside reluctantly, letting Sarah into the living room. Sarah hesitated, glancing around before finally speaking. "I don't understand what's happening with you. That video, it's awful. How could you treat someone like that?" Lisa felt defensive anger rising again. "Sarah, you know me." "Terrence twisted everything." "Lisa, stop." Sarah cut her off sharply, her voice firm yet kind. "I've watched the footage. It's crystal clear. You deliberately harassed him, and for what?" Lisa's face flushed. "I wasn't harassing him. He doesn't fit here, Sarah. You know what I mean." Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, I don't, and neither does anyone else. Lisa, you're better than this, or at least I thought you were." The quiet disappointment in Sarah's voice stung deeply. Lisa tried desperately to think of a reply, some way to justify herself, but nothing came. Sarah eventually stood up, shaking her head sadly. "You need to fix this, Lisa. But right now, everyone is upset, hurt actually, myself included." Sarah left quietly, leaving Lisa alone, her thoughts spiraling. Her closest friends, the neighbors she trusted, were now distancing themselves completely. The feeling of isolation intensified painfully, and Lisa realized with a sinking heart that she had become exactly what she'd always feared, an outsider. A day later, Lisa's daughter Emily appeared unexpectedly, visibly frustrated. She entered without knocking, standing rigidly in the doorway. Her voice was tight and cold. "Mom, we need to talk, seriously." Lisa swallowed nervously, motioning for Emily to sit, but Emily refused, pacing instead. "I've never been so embarrassed," Emily started sharply. "People at work, my friends, everyone has seen that video. They're asking how I could have a mother like you. I don't even know what to say." Lisa tried weakly. "Emily, it's not like I committed a crime. I made a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Emily replied harshly, her eyes filling with angry tears. "You did this deliberately, Mom. You targeted him because he's different." Do you understand how horrible that makes you look and makes me look? You raised me better than this. I thought you were better than this." Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but Emily shook her head fiercely, cutting her off. "I can't deal with this right now. You need to think seriously about what you've done and how you're going to fix it. Until then, please don't call me." Emily stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Lisa sank into the nearest chair, feeling crushed under the weight of Emily's anger and disappointment. Her daughter's words cut deeper than any rejection from neighbors. The final blow came a week later, during the monthly HOA meeting held at Sunnybrook's Community Center. Lisa debated attending, fearing the inevitable confrontation. Yet, skipping it would only further isolate her, confirming her guilt in everyone's eyes. Reluctantly, she went, sitting quietly in the back, hoping to go unnoticed. But Terrence stood up calmly midway through the meeting, addressing the room with his usual composed confidence. "Thank you all for your support lately," he began quietly. "I never wanted this to escalate, but I feel it's crucial we address it clearly, so everyone understands." Lisa's pulse quickened, her throat tightening nervously as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Terrence continued, "The footage I shared wasn't intended to shame anyone unnecessarily, but harassment, subtle or overt, should never be acceptable here or anywhere else. I simply ask that we hold each other accountable." The room fell silent, and Lisa felt every eye in the room shift discreetly toward her. Terrence glanced briefly in Lisa's direction, his voice steady but gentle. "I hope Lisa understands this isn't personal. It's about respect, community, and fairness. I hope moving forward, Sunnybrook can remain a place where everyone feels welcome and valued." Quiet applause followed Terrence's words, and Lisa shrank into her seat, deeply humiliated. People she'd known for years avoided meeting her eyes as they nodded their approval of Terrence's gentle but firm statement. After the meeting ended, no one approached Lisa. Neighbors who once would have greeted her warmly now passed her by silently. She gathered her belongings slowly, hoping someone might speak to her, offer sympathy, anything. But no one did. Walking home that evening, the familiar streets felt foreign. The houses that once symbolized her comfort now only highlighted her isolation. Terrence's gentle confrontation had sealed her fate. She was no longer Sunnybrook's respected resident. She was an example, a cautionary tale whispered among neighbors. Alone in her home, Lisa Caldwell finally confronted the painful reality. She'd lost far more than her reputation. Her pride, friendships, and even her daughter's respect had all been severely damaged. Lisa realized bitterly that she had become exactly what she'd once feared most, a source of embarrassment, isolation, and regret. The days following the HOA meeting felt painfully long and isolating for Lisa Caldwell. Every morning she woke up to a house that seemed too quiet, her phone devoid of friendly messages, and her social calendar hauntingly empty. The vibrant life she'd built in Sunnybrook had vanished, replaced by silence and cold, distant glances from neighbors she'd once considered friends. Lisa struggled with deep feelings of bitterness, blaming Terrence Brooks, blaming her neighbors, and even blaming her daughter, Emily. But beneath all her anger, Lisa knew the real fault lay within her. The uncomfortable truth hovered in the back of her mind like an unwelcome guest. This entire ordeal was her own doing, a result of prejudices she had refused to acknowledge. One afternoon, Lisa sat on her porch, sipping tea alone. She watched neighbors chatting cheerfully on their lawns, laughing and engaging warmly as they once had with her. But now, none of them acknowledged her presence. She felt invisible, like a ghost haunting the edges of the neighborhood she had once loved. Lost in these painful thoughts, Lisa suddenly noticed activity down the street, near the house of Mrs. Margaret Fuller, the neighborhood's beloved elderly resident. Mrs. Fuller had recently injured her ankle, making even simple tasks challenging. Lisa watched curiously as Terrence's familiar SUV pulled into Margaret's driveway. He stepped out, offering Margaret a warm smile, his manner relaxed and friendly. Lisa leaned forward slightly, observing carefully. Terrence greeted Margaret like an old friend, gently assisting her down the porch steps, patiently guiding her toward his vehicle. He was careful and attentive, making Margaret laugh softly with some cheerful comment Lisa couldn't hear clearly from her porch. Lisa felt her chest tighten painfully. Seeing Terrence help Margaret, so genuine, so selflessly, deepened her embarrassment. Terrence had shown nothing but kindness since moving in, always polite, always willing to help. And what had she done in return? She had treated him unfairly, disrespectfully, driven by hidden prejudice she had long denied. Her cheeks burned hotly with shame as she watched Terrence carefully close the passenger door for Margaret, ensuring she was comfortable before moving around to the driver's side. For a brief, agonizing moment, Terrence glanced down the street, his gaze landing directly on Lisa. Their eyes met. Lisa's breath caught sharply in her throat, embarrassment flooding her senses. Terrence held her gaze steadily, not angrily or smugly, but with quiet dignity and calm acknowledgement. Then, slowly, Terrence offered Lisa a subtle nod, simple, polite, respectful. No bitterness, no hostility, just quiet recognition. Lisa felt something inside her shatter softly. Terrence's dignified gesture struck deeper than any angry words ever could. It was in that moment Lisa truly understood the magnitude of her mistakes. Terrence wasn't the problem. Sunnybrook changing wasn't the problem. The problem had always been her own hidden prejudice, her inability to accept someone who simply didn't match her narrow expectations. After Terrence drove away, Lisa remained sitting on her porch, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. She finally allowed herself to feel the weight of her regret fully. How had she let herself become this person, someone who hurt others to preserve her comfort? The next morning, driven by a need to make amends, Lisa gathered her courage and walked slowly to Terrence's home. Each step felt heavy, anxiety gripping her tightly as she approached the door. She took a deep breath and knocked gently. Terrence opened the door, initially surprised but quickly recovering with his usual calm courtesy. "Good morning, Lisa." "Terrence," she began softly, her voice trembling. "I know I'm probably the last person you expected or wanted to see right now, but I had to come. I had to tell you how deeply sorry I am for everything." Terrence regarded her quietly, listening without interrupting. Lisa swallowed hard, continuing painfully. "I treated you unfairly and I acted from ignorance and fear, things I didn't even realize I carried until now. I was wrong, Terrence. Completely and utterly wrong. You didn't deserve any of it." Terrence waited patiently, considering her words. Finally, he spoke gently. "I appreciate you coming here, Lisa. It's not easy confronting our faults. Trust me, I know that well." Lisa nodded slowly, deeply humbled by his grace. "I want to change. I need to change. I just hope someday you can forgive me." Terrence smiled faintly, not dismissively but genuinely. "Everyone deserves a second chance. I hope you find the peace you're looking for, Lisa, and if you're truly sincere, the community will eventually see that." Lisa left Terrence's house that day with a new determination. She couldn't erase the past, but she could begin rebuilding trust. She spent the following days reflecting deeply, educating herself about racial bias, and confronting truths she'd previously avoided. Slowly, Lisa's genuine attempts at change began to heal small wounds. While trust wasn't regained instantly, neighbors cautiously started to engage again. Terrence's kindness and willingness to forgive encouraged others to reconsider their judgments, allowing Lisa a tentative path toward redemption. One evening, Lisa called Emily, desperate for reconciliation. "Emily, please hear me out," she pleaded softly. "You were right and I was wrong. I see that clearly now. Terrence helped me realize things I should have known long ago." Emily listened quietly before finally replying with a deep sigh. Mom, acknowledging it is the first step. It'll take time, but I'm glad you're trying. Just promise me you won't slip back into old habits. I promise, Lisa answered firmly, meaning every word. As days passed, Lisa discovered a deeper sense of purpose. Inspired by Terrence's grace and Sunnybrook's willingness to forgive, she began actively promoting awareness within the community. Lisa joined local initiatives focused on diversity and inclusion, openly sharing her experience to educate others about the subtle dangers of hidden prejudice. Terrence continued being an example of patience and dignity, always supporting Lisa's efforts quietly from afar. Eventually, Sunnybrook became stronger, more united, not by ignoring uncomfortable issues but by openly confronting them. Lisa's transformation, sparked by Terrence's simple act of kindness, reminded everyone in Sunnybrook that real change began by looking inward, facing uncomfortable truths, and committing to growth. The story of Lisa's journey became a powerful testament, shared passionately through community forums and groups, including the platform H2 Black Thread. It served as a crucial reminder of the destructive nature of prejudice and the transformative power of empathy. And most importantly, it showed that acknowledging our mistakes, no matter how painful, was the essential first step toward healing, change, and positive growth.